Women are necessary for peace building, peacekeeping, right from national to grassroots level. Women are more than just singers and dancers for peace rallies and events. Women are natural negotiators and mediators, right from the family unit and beyond. As it is, women lay as an untapped resource for ensuring that peace initiatives last. South Sudanese women are often the biggest losers in times of conflicts where they have lost livelihoods, their lives, and subjected to conflict-related sexual violence. This increase in female-headed households when male figures die in conflicts, obligated to conform to cultural practices that are potentially harmful to them. All these clearly demonstrates the importance of women participation in peace building. So to make this conversation of Women International Day more interactive, I'm joined live in the studio by Betty Modi, Kepa Dima, and Doruba Judith. It's good to have all of you in the studio. Good morning.
Thank you. Thank you.
Betty, let me start with you. Today is the International Women's Day, so let's talk about the importance or the significance of this day to women.
Thank you. I think this day is very, very important to women, and internationally this day is celebrated in memory of the historical, cultural, and political achievements of women. And the day is also observed in support of acting against gender inequality around the world. And this fits in with the theme of this year's celebration, which talks of gender equality today for a sustainable tomorrow. And so I'll say yes, it's very, very important in that this day's celebration is important to celebrate women and to reflect on the ongoing progress and steps taken that get us closer to gender equality. And also, we're all aware that women are integral members of society, communities, families, in the workforce, and deserve to be recognized as such. And a person's gender should not dictate their success opportunities to be successful in however way you want to define that success. And so, gender inequalities need to be addressed today for a better and sustainable tomorrow.
Right. And Kepa, would you like to add something?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, thanks to USAID for funding us to be in the studio, and thanks to iRadio for hosting us here. I would say that this is a very important day with the world over, including South Sudan, not only for women, but for both women and men, boys and girls. Why is it very important? It is important because we're actually taking stock of the progress made so far in terms of women, achievements, and the effective role of women in pushing for equality, gender equality. So this is a day that we actually reckon that, like you already said earlier on, when you talk about peace, peace is a very comprehensive aspect that includes harmony, includes security, includes not just the well-being of women and men, but also includes non-discrimination in such a way that both genders, men and women, are free from discrimination and violence. So I think this is a very historic day the world over for us to reckon with, the fact that there are inequalities in the world, and we need to work towards a world that is of equal status.
Right. And Judith, can you share with us also why do we mark this day?
In addition to what my colleagues have said, International Women's Day, it's really very important. One, we are looking at the different achievements that have been done worldwide, and also reflecting back to South Sudan, looking at the different treaties, agreements that have been signed. It gives us time to reflect on the progress, how far we have achieved, whatever we have signed, and also it helps us to look at the challenges. What have we done? What are some of the challenges not helping us to achieve some of the progress? And it's also a day that we use for advocacy with the different stakeholders to question the different stakeholders, to account for the commitment, and it helps us to push for women agenda. So you find that women come together to discuss, brainstorm on the different issues. Like today we are in the media to advocate and also let the public know that this day is very important.
Right. And you're still listening to the Dawn program. We're talking about the International Women's Day. We have in the studio Doroba Judith from the Shaja Salam, or Promote Peace. We also have Kepa Dima from the Resilience Through Agriculture in South Sudan, and Betty is from the Chemonix International. They're all USAID implementing partners. Betty, let me come to you and let's talk about the theme of this year. What do you know about it, and can you tell us more about this year's theme?
Well, this year's theme is, as I mentioned earlier, it's gender equality today for our sustainable tomorrow, and it's celebrated under the slogan "Break the Bias." And
What is that?
Yeah. So when we talk of breaking the bias, we actually want to get rid of that, those thoughts that kind of like create a difference between gender, male and female. And we're aware that women are different from men. That's known historically. But we're also aware that both men and women, girls and boys, are critical part of society. And those differences should be celebrated, and a woman's contribution should be valued. Everyone, including women, bring an important voice to the table and deserve to be treated in an equitable manner.
Right, and this brings me to you, Kepa, and the issue of this break the bias on this International Women's Day. And you know, women have been complaining about this issue of biasness against them, and especially from fellow men, you and I. So, how would you interpret this? What is happening?
Yeah, I think first of all, let me reinforce on the biases. Biases are basically based on stereotypes, generalizations, which are based on feelings. And these biases are not something that just happen now. They're actually based on some norms and cultures and traditions, which may have served some purpose in the past. But as we know, society is always evolving. It's not static. It's very dynamic. And this dynamism requires that we have to propel moving forward in the right direction. Otherwise, if we cannot revibrate according to contextual existence, then we become biased. Indeed, there are evidence that have been shown clearly that where equal participation, both men and women, are involved, it actually creates a very peaceful society. It creates economic growth, and it actually shrinks the poverty. So what I would say is that really we need to work towards supporting our sisters and our daughters to ensure that we are equal participants in this space.
Right, and that brings me to you also, Judith. And what are some of the common stereotypes and biases against women? Let's talk about the workplace, and how do women really deal with this kind of discrimination? And Betty, you can later on add on what Judith is going to say. Go ahead.
First, I would like to add something
Sure,
on the
go
previous
ahead.
question.
Sure.
When we look at the theme for this year, it looks at the theme actually embraces diversity, social inclusion, gender equity, and equality, and it's very important because when we talk about the discriminated, it's not only women. We have the minority groups as well. We have the disabled within the communities. How are these people able to access services? So it's important to break the bias based on the different stereotypes and the myths that exist in society. Once you break the bias, if there's equal participation, there's participation in decision making. Once people participate in decision making, development is realized, and peace will also be there, and everyone's opinion will also be taken into consideration. Now, coming back to the issue of the biases that exist at workplace or within society, for a fact, within society, last year we did a gender assessment, and we were able to do in 3 different locations. In the 3 different locations, you find out that the biases vary from one location to another. In one particular location, we interviewed one of the chiefs, and he's like, you know what, women are very weak. And then we're like, okay, women are weak. What do you mean by that? It's like, for example, you cannot put a woman as a chief because the position comes with roles like mobilizing the army, mobilizing the youth, mobilizing the other women groups. So
Meaning women cannot do that?
That's the question. That is the generalization from one of the chiefs around Akobo, through our interviews. So there are different biases that exist. One is in regards to positions, that women are weak, but that's not true. There are also employment opportunities, like positions like directors, managers are not regarded as positions for women. Yet these are things that people can actually do. Women can do this. There are good women who are managers. There are women who are directors. It also comes to opportunities like in education, pilots, doctors. But then, like, women have been discriminated in some of these with the belief that they cannot be in position to be a pilot or maybe to lead a plane. So these are some of the biases that are based on maybe a few assumptions, but then they are not proven. within society.
Right, and Betty, if you would like to add something, I'll also give an example of in the first hour of the program today, we actually featured a second grade judge. She's a female judge called Ajok. Tito Tilar, and it was really difficult for her at her workplace to become a judge because of the stereotype and because of the men-dominated society. But what else do you know, Betty, when we talk about biases against women at workplaces?
I think biases against women in workplaces is a real issue, and it's the problem is that it's not something that you can actually put your finger on. It's like intangible. But it's actually there, you can feel it, but you can't count it, and that's where the problem is. And it's actually like a stereotype which is ingrained in people, like certain jobs or careers are gender specific. Like a simple example is if you see a woman driving a car, leave alone the private cars, put aside, like driving a lorry or something like that, it's viewed like very strange. People feel stigmatized.
Or a taxi.
And if you see a woman working as a mechanic, a carpenter, a fisherman, constructor, electrician, like you are viewed in a very strange way, like, hey, that's supposed to be a man's job. Why is she doing it?
What are you doing here?
What are you doing here? I mean, what do you mean? Even the women will ask you the same questions. And it also applies to the men. When you hear of a man who is like a midwife, like immediately you get a feeling like, hey, is a midwife not supposed to be a woman? Why is it a man? So these things are real. They are real. And they are very difficult to deal with because you can't actually place your finger on it. However, as more and more women are beginning to take up such jobs and employers are advocating for more gender balance and equality and equal opportunity, it's great to see women and men receive encouragement to be themselves and to pursue roles that interest them, and to see social stigma fading.
Right. And Kepa, that brings me to you, this issue of a stereotype. And let's talk about a little bit about negative cultural beliefs that contribute to bias and also discrimination against women. Let's emphasize on this first, and after that, tell us, what do you really think can be done, especially from the society, to ensure that women are equal as men, gender parity?
Yeah, I think principally all these biases and inequality are actually rooted in traditions and cultural practices, which have been around for ages, for generations. And we're not saying that these practices are totally, all of them bad, because we know in each and every society, there are norms and values that are acceptable. But not all those norms and values are actually cognizant of the fact that we need to put equal participation or respect for for both genders. So really some of these practices are very detrimental, particularly to women, in as much as we know the role of women in our society. So first to start with, I think we need to acknowledge the fact that masculinity is not an issue in itself. It's not a problem in as long as it is practiced in a very responsible manner. But if we practice masculinity in a way that becomes oppressive to the women, to the girls, then that becomes a major issue that needs to be tackled.
All right.
Because that is absolutely unacceptable. Yes.
Right, let's make this conversation now more interactive. You can now dial 11986 or send a text to 13986 and our guest in the studio will respond to your comments and questions. We talk about the International Women's Day. اتصل علينا وقدم تعليقات بتاعك لضيوف بتاعنا في الاستوديو. أرقام بتاعنا 11986 اي راديو.
الو صباح الخير.
صباح النور.
معك فرانكو سبيت.
نعم فرانكو تفضل.
نعم، تحية لهم الأمهات في كل أنحاء. نقول إنه الأم مدرسة إذا أعددت شعب طيب الأخلاق. فبمناسبة الأم طبعا في أنا بسأل بس الضيوف في الاستديو كالعادة في استخدام العنف ضد الأطفال الصغار كأمهات، وفي يعني مثلا في الأمهات الرابع يعني بيستخدموا العنف ضد الأطفال، حتى في البيوت ذات بيستخدموا العنف ضد الأطفال. هل إغاظهم شنو بالنسبة للأمهات بيستخدموا العنف كإغاظ؟ شكرا جزيلا.
شكرا جزيلا للمشاركة بتاعك. ده كان هناك. Franco was asking about what actions can be taken against women who are beating up their children, violence against children by women, especially because we are talking about the women, the International Women's Day.
But yes, we recognize that violence is not just against women, but also including children. So really, I think we need to understand that when it comes to discipline, there are so many ways of meting out discipline. Discipline does not necessarily require to be, caning or, corporal punishment on someone. But there are many ways of how you can correct a child if a child has made some mistake, where you can sit her or him down and logically explain why the behavior he or she is involved in is not the correct one. What would be the dire consequences from such a behavior? And what would be the contrast if he or she behaves in the right manner? So I think intellectual reasoning with children actually creates more value and builds a relationship between the parents and the children.
Right, and right, go ahead.
And when it comes to women, if everybody can make a mistake, even men make mistake. So put yourself, if me as a man, if I make a mistake, do I expect to be beaten? That is totally unacceptable. If a woman, if your wife makes a mistake, that is not ground at all for you to take the cane and start caning her, because mistakes are human.
Right.
So really, I think we need to upgrade our thinking and our approaches to managing in discipline, whether at the home or the societal level.
Right. And Betty, what's your message? Because there are parents, so let's say women, who believe that believe in domestic violence, that torturing or beating up the child is in a way of trying to raise him or her, for instance. So what would you tell them?
I think this is actually something that's ingrained in society.
Yeah.
Like people believe, like mothers believe that if you punish a child, he'll grow up to be better. In one way or another, we can say it's okay, and on the other point, we can say it's wrong. Like when a child does something which is wrong, you have to punish him or her, because that sends the message that what you're doing is not right, and this is how it should be done. And that also brings up the point that when you are a mother and you're punishing a child, you need to make it clear to the child why he's being punished. And tell him, this is what I want you to do, and this is what I don't want you to do. That way they can learn. But when punishment becomes excessive, like you beat somebody to the point of like injuring him or beating him senseless, I mean, this is violence. This is violence, and this is something that should not be advocated for.
Good morning, it's iRadio.
Yes, a very good morning to you once again. 13 minutes to the top of the hour. You're still listening to the Dawn program here on iRadio with me, Emmanuel Joseph Akile, and we're talking about the International Women's Day. I still have in the studio with me Betty Modi from the Chemonix International, Kepa Dima, Resilience Through Agriculture in South Sudan, and Doruba Judith from Sheja Salam, or Promote Peace. They are actually implementing partners of the USAID. Now, let's have your say on the question raised by Manud George about the celebration of this day when women are still suffering. Yes, let me start with you, Judith.
To respond to Modi's question on how would women in the refugee camps or the displaced communities commemorate this day. As I mentioned earlier on, today it's not only about achieving the progress of women. Women look at some of the challenges, the issues that they are faced within society, how they can be part of the change. For example, if they're in the refugee camps, how can be part of the change of peace, of promoting peace within communities? How can they be part of uplifting other women? How can they be the part of change within the society that is creating the bias against them? So this day encourages women to come together to talk and reflect on the different issues facing them. If it's trauma, how can they deal with the trauma? If it's peace, how can they really promote peace? It's more on positivity, on advocating for that positive cause.
Right. And Betty, would you like to add something?
I totally agree with my sister here. There are situations that like you can't control. And that's exactly what he's raising up. So the essence of celebrating this day is not to change their status in the refugee camps or the suffering they're going through. But the point is that we need to start from somewhere. We need to start creating that awareness that there are certain things we can act on as women. those small things, like the question or the other gentleman brought up earlier, like the issue of caning your child like you are battling an enemy or something like that. So these are small things that women can change in whatever situation they're in, and they shouldn't lose hope. Where they are, wherever they are, this is not the time to lose hope, but this is the time to stand up and say, hey, I think I can do something to address the situation I'm in.
Right, and just a follow-up question on what we earlier talked about, Betty, the issue of these stereotypes and cultural beliefs about certain things on women. Do you think women themselves are also part of the problems? Do you think they are also contributing to these kind of problems we talked about earlier?
Well, I'll say a yes and a no.
Oh.
Because it entirely depends on which angle you're looking at it from. Like under normal circumstances, I don't think a woman will wish anything bad for another woman or a child or a man or anything like that. They're mothers. They have a lot of empathy. And
we have reports of women and girls fighting at workplaces sometimes.
yes,
So what is that?
but these are extremes. We like, it's not like a clear-cut line that all the women are good. Everywhere there's good things and there are bad things.
Yeah.
And that is cross-cutting across gender, whether a man or a woman.
Right.
But looking at it from the positive aspect, most women actually they have a lot of empathy. They feel for the other person and they can't do something bad. But when you look at it from
So you can do
another
something
angle-
bad to a fellow man, but not...
no. Remember, we're also talking about gender equality.
Right.
So whatever you wish for yourself, you should also wish it for the other person,
Right.
being a male or a female.
Right.
And that's the society we're trying to advocate for.
Right.
But when you look at it from another angle, like I can say women indirectly actually have a contribution to the biases. Like if you see our fellow woman suffering and you do nothing, like that complacency, like you feel that's not part of my responsibility, that's not my job, you refuse to speak up, you're indirectly contributing to that problem actually. So yeah, I think women need to change their mentality and they need to look at things from a positive angle instead of taking that stand that okay, it's not my job, it's not my business.
Right. And talking about this, speak out, and I'll come to you, Kepa, with a question of, in your line of work, what actions or interventions speak to breaking biases, and tell us about also achievements and challenges, and you can later add on. You want to come in?
Yes, I want to add something
Go ahead.
actual on
Yeah,
what
sure.
Betty has discussed.
Go ahead.
Yeah, on your question that are women sometimes part of the problem? I'll agree that yes, women sometimes are part of the problem. Out of ignorance, sometimes women adhere to some of these biases. For example, in certain communities, women wanting to be beaten as a sign of love, and that is one other aspect of adhering to the negative biases. In the marriage context, you find out mothers-in-laws, sister-in-laws bullying the fellow women in the houses. So they are contributing to that. And lastly, also you find out they say charity begins at home. At the family settings, our gender roles are set from there. Currently we are talking about gender equality. We are not raising the boy child the same way we are raising the girl child. We are raising the girl child to have equal opportunities to go to school. We are not raising the boy child by telling him cooking is not a gender role. You can as well do that. You can as well sweep the compound. We are not doing that. So, and in most cases in the family settings, it's the mothers who spearhead the house settings. The father is in most cases in our South Sudanese context.
So you're saying they should revisit this kind of cultural practices in the society?
Absolutely. If we're raising the girl child to access services, to access education, then we should also raise the boy child to be able to do some of the girls things, like the cooking. If you have a boy and a girl, tell them that you both can do the same thing in the house. Because if you're raising him that he shouldn't be able to cook, he'll also grow up with that mentality that okay, cooking is a gender role, it's for women.
Right. Kepa, let's talk about challenges and achievements briefly. Before that, we'll give you each 1 minute for your last remarks. Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. I think at the workplace there are quite a number of challenges that tend to speak to these gender biases. Throughout my life, I've seen women being subjected to practices that are really not becoming. And I think we have made, at my workplace, we have made deliberate effort to ensure that we promote inclusivity, where women, men, boys, and girls are encouraged to participate in all our program activities. This is because we don't want to be biased to a particular segment of the society. We know in the context of South Sudan, women constitute probably around 60 to 70% of the entire population. So really leaving this biggest chunk of the population out of the equation will not contribute to effective development in this country. So that's one area where we want to promote equality between various genders, the various demographic status, to ensure that all of us are part and parcel of the processes. The second aspect is also we're looking at the issue of masculinity. Masculinity in the South Sudanese context is perceived to be, men are perceived to be superior by certain status compared to women, which is a notion that we really need to break down that kind of notion, because in reality we are all stakeholders, joint stakeholders in this exercise. So we actually promote what we call shared responsibility between the men and the women right from the household level, where decisions, whether they're economic decisions, whether they're health decisions or social decisions, have to be jointly taken between the men and the women.
Right.
The husband and the wife.
Right.
In that way, we are fostering an environment where we bring our children who we are playing as role models to them, and that we believe that the next generation is going to be a better generation of
Right,
Sudanese.
right. Since you're running out of time, I give you each about 30 seconds for your last remarks. I begin with you, Judith.
Today, my message out there to the general public is that if there are any biases at workplace, please report them. For example, issues around exploitation, harassment by powerful managers. It's important to report them to the national channels that exist at the workplace. Also, the other thing is today I'll really say that I'll not only be looking at the achievement, because that's very far, but then how do we engage the men in such conversations to be champions of gender equality? How can we engage the boys and the chiefs also within communities? We need to move out from a gender sensitive lane to gender transformative angle. So happy International Women's Day to all the listeners outside there.
Right.
Be a champion of gender equality.
Thank you for that. Judith Kepa?
Yes, ultimately, I think our laws are very clear. The Constitution is very clear in terms of equality between the both genders, men and women. South Sudan is one of the countries that has signed to the Convention on Elimination of all forms of discrimination against women. So I believe we as a country, we as a community, we must live up to the task of promoting equality in this country, and that will make this country a great country to live in.
Right.
Thank you.
Betty?
Well, I'll say the South Sudanese women are some of the strongest and most resilient people I've actually seen in the world. And I think that their contributions to their families, communities, and workplaces are very important and significant in ways that are sometimes not always visible to society. And it's one thing to recognize and appreciate them through the International Women's Day, but next steps are empowering these women to recognize their own worth and demand the discussions that lead to actionable change for a diverse, equitable, and an inclusive world.
Right.
Happy Women's Day.
Right, thank you. Betty Modi from the Chemonex International, Kepadima, Resilience Through Agriculture in South Sudan, and Doroba Judith from Sheja Salam, or Promote Peace, implementing partners of USAID. Thank you all for joining us on this day.
You're welcome, sir.
And with that, we have come to the end of the Dawn edition today. Do join us again tomorrow at the same time to get the latest on what's happening in South Sudan and beyond the borders. Well, up next, news in Arabic with Al-Hadi Hawari. On behalf of the Dawn team, producer Charles Wote, my name is Emmanuel Joseph Akile. Happy International Women's Day.